Is Brian joining?
I have no idea.
He didn't say he wasn't. Lars said he couldn't make it. Baby stuff.
I think that was last time.
Guess we can probably just start without him.
Oh yeah, you're right. There was last time.
We can probably give it like a minute or two.
Yeah. All
See
right.
if they join, and then we can get started. Oh.
Spooky.
I mean, we can probably get started. I don't know.
We're recording. You can always watch the recording.
Yeah. Ah, there we go.
Oh,
Hey.
other Brian.
Well, I guess I can go first. So it just about finished up getting the assembly ported over to ARM64 for the new MacBooks. That should at least let people, compile and run Lumen in its current state on new MacBooks natively. I think it probably works with the Rosetta 2 stuff, but I don't have a M1 to check, so we'll just have to rely on people to tell us, I guess. But in any case, it's mostly a moot point because I've just about finished porting all the assembly. The main thing that we'll probably need to do is go through and review any places where we've either asserted that the platform is x86-64 or just failed to implement, some function or module for other platforms. I don't know if any of you happen to have one of the new MacBooks yet. I'm planning to get one in a little while, but probably be a month or two.
Dockyard's current refresh cycle, like Patrick, IT guy at Dockyard, is doing the refresh, and I'm getting one, and he's not ready for us to switch to the M1. So at least in the current set of refreshes, we're not getting M1s. Maybe Hans, since he joined later, will qualify of like 3 of us to get an M1. But obviously, if you're buying your own, you'll get one first. But I won't have one for like 3 years now.
Yeah, I'm just gonna trade in my current one for an M1.
I might consider getting one like M2 or something. I don't think I want to get the first gen.
Yeah, I'm generally fairly leery about that stuff. I hold off for usually 1 or 2 cycles, but considering things seem to be relatively smooth already, and it's at least beneficial to be able to get ahead of the curve a little bit on some of the development stuff we're doing. I figure it's worth being a little bit of a canary in the coal mine for this, but I'm not quite in a position to do that yet. too much time would be spent trying to get a new machine spun up. So I'm just going to wait until probably later this spring. But in any case, I wanted to at least not hold up the works too much for anybody that already is making that switch. So I figured if we, try and at least make sure Lumen's able to compile and run on those platforms, then even if none of us have one of the new MacBooks, somebody that is willing to put in the time to kind of test things a little bit and flesh any of the issues out, that'll give us a bit of a head start. I don't think there's probably an option for us to do CI builds with that yet, but we probably can do ARM64 builds on Linux, which is close enough. I don't think any of the new like M1 related changes are significant enough or relevant to us in a way that's going to matter, because the M1 runs AR64 assembly with the additional constraints of Apple's take on ARM64 assembly. So their calling convention stuff varies a little bit different from the standard, but not in any like super significant way. But we could still build and target ARM64 on Linux despite those differences. Now at least give us a ballpark idea of what remains to be supported.
Can we opt into ARM64 Linux on GitHub Actions?
I don't actually know. I haven't investigated that yet. I do know that I've seen people doing CI with ARM64 on AWS, but I don't actually know if GitHub Actions support that yet. In any case, the one option that we can do is run images on or via QEMU. So you can do Docker builds to generate an ARM64 container, and then I think you can run that container via an emulator, but that may not really be viable for running in GitHub Actions at this point in time, but I don't know, potentially an option.
They seem to support ARM.
They do or they don't?
They seem to, yeah, I think so.
Nice. Well, that's definitely beneficial. If we can do native builds on ARM64, then that gives us a good end-to-end test. Realistically, for releases, probably will be cross-compiling LLVM rather than trying to do native builds. But I guess that's going to depend a little bit on how that goes, if there's any issues with that. That's the only other, I guess, outstanding thing on supporting ARM64 is getting an LLVM build. But setting the flag, so that is fairly simple. I just need to do a test cross-compile and see how it goes. And if it goes smoothly, then sweet. If not, then I'll probably have to, figure out how I can set up some automation to make that part of the overall release cycle.
Yeah, right now the biggest blocker is we need CI funding to be able to change our memory on the CIs to be able to do an LLVM build, because like the free tiers don't have enough memory. One
option, if we happen to have any spare machines ourselves, is to set up at least one self-hosted runner, that we can trigger builds on in like restricted contexts. So, not letting pull requests, for example, run on it, but any pushes to master with commit signed by one of us could run on a self-hosted build machine that one of us has.
Like a pretty beefy Kubernetes cluster that's running like locally in my hackerspace that we might be able to borrow some capacity from if we want to.
Nice. Yeah, we just the main thing there is we just need to be a little bit careful about what situations we let builds run on a self-hosted runner, so that somebody can't just open up a pull request with some malicious code that executes and fuck up somebody's, Kubernetes cluster or their VM or, whatever kind of stuff they want to get up to,
Yeah.
I have a GitHub Actions runner controller that I forked and maintain for my own use at distro right now, that will let you run a GitHub Actions on a K8s cluster. So you don't have to have like long running, containers consuming resources in the cluster. It just spins up new containers on demand, up to some, maximum number of replicas. So that might work well in your hackerspace ponds if they're open with running that controller, in some dedicated namespace for that.
Send me the info for it. It's open source or?
Yeah. It was a fork of another open source project. I'm pretty sure I didn't have anything proprietary in there. I tried to keep it. Let me just make sure it's not closed for some reason or another. Yeah, it's not private, so I'll send you a link.
Nice.
But yeah, that's it for me. Just trying to get that out of the way, since I figured that might be, blocking some people. It seems quite a few folks have already started using the new MacBooks. The other work that I was doing, I haven't gotten a chance to get to since last week, other than, these changes. So that's all for me.
For me, I haven't had a lot of time. Docker didn't have Docker Friday last week because we had Monday off for MLK Day. I have fit in, while doing long compiles for client work, done long compiles for Lumen work in the background. So I almost have all the compilers gone from alloc. The only thing that's a little questionable is we specifically made a alloc in place or realloc in place wrapper, and we used to be able to say we want realloc in place. But now the API no longer lets you say that, because they who gives a shit if they expected that you wouldn't fail if it realloced, but we will. So right now, obviously, if it's supposed to work because it's reallocating inside of a block that we made, so it should work. And we have a check that the pointer doesn't move, so it should work as we wrote it, but it's not as guaranteed as it was under the old API. So we want to look at it again.
Realloc in place is supposed to be non-fallible. How does that work?
No,
is there something you're supposed to check before you fill it?
Realloc in place is gone. The concept of it.
It's
they
entirely gone?
as a team agreed. Who in the hell would actually care that you didn't that you should fail if it moved?
There is grow and shrink though.
Well, no, the whole purpose of realloc in place is that if it fails, it means that you can't realloc in place. Right,
and they no longer have that in the underlying API. We can't say placement in place anymore. It's gone. The placement system's gone.
So you can't even dictate now anymore whether or not...
No, not through the generic API. Obviously, if we had a non-generic API and we could use the underlying sysallocators Ralloc, it would work. But through the generic allocator API, that is no longer a concept.
Man, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
I can't believe they removed that.
I guess in their use cases, they didn't think it was important. I'm not... The weird part is that I'm isn't it necessary for the pin system? So that feels weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of reasons why you would care about whether something moves or not, particularly for systems that potentially want to interop with garbage collection.
Yeah.
Like you can freely resize something if you don't have to move it, but if you have to move it, then that potentially triggers a bunch of other changes.
So the one thing we have to check is that there are default implementations for. So the zeroing is separate APIs now. Like its grow is I don't care, uninitialized. Grow zeroed is wheel zero, but the way the trait is implemented is grow zeroed is not I'm going to call grow and then zero it. It's implemented as I'm going to call alloc, zero the new alloc, and then dealloc the old one. So we need to double check that if we are explicitly using the zero API, then we go back and make sure that it calls the grow API that will, do an actual grow and only zero out the new bits. And shrink, obviously, it doesn't matter because it's just shrinking. And there's no shrink zero. But it is one of the weird things of the default implementations on the trait is that the grow zero does not call grow. It calls alloc and dealloc.
Man, that is so weird.
Yeah, I don't know why they would do that. What I'm guessing is in the allocators they have, they're assuming a zeroing allocator or something. But the weird part is that they are explicitly zeroing it, so they don't assume that either. So I don't know why grow zero does not delegate to grow and then zero the output from grow. I don't know why. So that's how I did the override, where I thought it was important, but I don't know where we're actually calling grow zeroed. In most places, I think we don't care. Like we happen to get zeroed memory because like how the underlying Mac allocator works, and it's really nice for debugging. But I don't think we explicitly care in most places that it is zeroed.
It's so weird that they essentially now have forced allocators to realloc anytime you want to grow an allocation.
No, not for grow. Just for grow zeroed. For grow, it doesn't work that way.
Oh, okay.
I think grow you have to implement, but grow zero isn't. It's a default allocator. Or
so
no, wait,
they're making the assumption that grow
and shrink and all of those and grow zero, they're all just provided methods, so you can implement them. They just have default implementations.
Right. So grow works the same way. Is that it has a default implementation that is allocate, copy, deallocate, and so they're all given to you. And so grow zeroed is implemented the same way internally as grow is, but it just zeroes the memory, as opposed to calling grow and zeroing it. I don't know why they would do it that way, as opposed to delegating to grow, but that's how the default implementations work. So if you don't override, you get this weird split of like the grow grows efficiently, while the grow zeroed just allocates and deallocates, so it's less efficient. So you have to remember to override them. If we're going to use the zeroed ones, that is, of course. If we're not, then it doesn't matter.
I guess the implication is that they don't feel, at least from a default standpoint, that they can rely on just zeroing the new region, whatever extra was appended to the original allocation. The only safe option is to reallocate and zero out the whole block, which I can understand, I guess, from a safety perspective, but it's probably surprising behavior to most people. Maybe not, I don't know. But for our purposes, it doesn't really matter.
How is that any safer, though?
Well, the implication is that potentially you don't know the state of the original memory. And if you assume that it's all safe memory to be used once you've grown it. Like the original allocation might not have been zeroed, but then you grow it, and so now you have like partially zeroed memory.
But they'll still copy that like original part over to the new one, right?
It might also be a weird like a tearing thing, because like I know for WASM they're super concerned when they're doing byte copies about how if the underlying like implementation of copying is tearing for like large vector copies that are more efficient in the state of thread. So maybe the Rust guys think that it's better to start with all zeros and copy over even when doing U8 copies, which should be non-tearing. I don't know. It's just a guess.
I don't.
I mean,
don't
you're
get why
right,
they have
Hans. Like
those.
it basically would like be a problem either way, I guess, if they're just doing a straight bit copy of the old region into the new one. I'm not sure why they do it that way.
If they have all of these concerns, I don't get why they just don't leave all of the methods as required and just let you implement them all yourself in the best way for that allocator.
They probably wanted. I don't know. I haven't followed all the why are we doing this. It's actually really hard to do that. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know how to navigate the RFC links because the RFC, of course, goes to the original RFC from 2017. But like from there, it's not obvious. Like you click here to get like this is the commit that changed it to now. So like to know what to do, I'm just looking at the mod RS that contains allocator because I couldn't find the actual commit that says, you know, like a PR statement of like these are the changes we made to change from the old API to this API. Do this. Like they don't. It doesn't seem to work that way. They seem to agree in comments to the changes, and then the PR happens. But the PR doesn't have the nice like code sample of this is how it works now. And so I'm just going off of how it looks and deleting the part of the API that isn't there.
Don't they have a discussion thread that covers all of the, motivation behind the PRs? Like there's somewhere in the conversations happening.
There aren't that many code samples. So it's more like they agree like, oh, we don't need this, we don't need that. And like it's not always like markdown code marks. So like they're talking about it in English. So like it's not obvious like, oh, this is what you need to do. I'd have to read, a thread that lasts for like 6 months.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to follow, no question. I imagine somewhere in there is probably buried the conversation about why they remove those things. And
yeah, I definitely found that. I found the English conversation of like why is in place gone, and they're like, who would ever need this? Is what it pretty much comes down to. Like no one could think of a reason why this is necessary. And like the pin thing is something I just thought of now. I'm like, wait, how do pins work then?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe the thing with pins is that there is no opportunity to resize something that's pinned.
Yeah, that's what I'm guessing is that you don't.
A good example would be if you are building a virtual machine or a runtime that allocates a stack, you want to, adjust the size of that stack, the only thing you can do is reallocate in place. There is you can't reallocate that and move that, not unless you want to scan the entire stack for.
Well, so I think their thinking is that the point of the reallocate in place is that it like panics or like it errors if it doesn't work. And so the API they're thinking would happen instead is that if you see that the pointer that reallocate returns is different, then you're like, oh, I have to do my copy procedure. That's the argument they were making is that everything, it doesn't make sense that it would just straight up like be bad if it moves because otherwise it would be an out of memory condition almost.
Well, why would you want to allocate if you can't use the allocation? That's what I don't understand. Like the premise of reallocate in place is that it's both a safety thing and an optimization because it does not allocate in the case where you can't do it in place. But I guess in their model, they're saying like it's fine if we reallocate this thing,
right? So they would
bail out.
Yeah, the only thing weird about it is that obviously in some cases it might be you have to copy different, and so it assumes, and obviously we could fix this with the allocator, but we can't because we're at the byte level. That when a move happens, you would do the copy differently, because you have internal pointers or something. And they're just assuming that if you notice the pointer moves, then you fix it after the fact, I guess? I don't know. Like, I don't get that.
So just to be clear, their realloc deallocates the original allocation.
Remember, they don't have a realloc anymore. They have grow and shrink only. And those, yes, their default implementation the allocates or allocates zeros based on the the zeroed prefix, and then it does a copy non-overlapping from pointer to new pointer.
The semantics of grow is that you transfer ownership of the old memory and you get ownership of a new memory in return. That may or may not be the same memory that's been expanded, but that's the semantics.
Man, that's fucked.
Yeah, so
yeah,
like,
I mean, we definitely couldn't use that to like build anything that relies on memory not moving around.
We
Right,
can just
so
do our own trait internally. It's annoying, but yeah.
Yeah, that's what we'll have to do.
so we'll see it. It's probably going to fall over in weird ways, and then we're going to have to figure out where we need a super trait of it to give us access to things not moving. But the glaring one that popped out was when we literally have a function called realloc in place with your comment of like, if this doesn't realloc in place, something's broken. So like, it's probably going to be broken unless by a fluke the Mac allocator can realloc in place. But right now we can't force it through the trait to do it the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, at least the way that I've built things on top of the underlying system allocator is that, we support reallocating in place sort of as like a best effort kind of thing. If it doesn't, returns an error that lets us decide whether or not that's a fatal error or not. But in the general case, it's more of an optimization. The exception to that is with stacks, but stacks are allocated manually anyways. We're not using like we're not using an allocator trait for that, except for, potentially out of convenience or something. So the main exception to that is process heaps. Those were, our custom allocators are managing process heaps, and they are built on top of those traits. So we just have to make sure that our implementation of those traits, at least the ones that we're using to manage process heaps, don't just like decide to move shit around. And probably treat it as an error.
Yeah, there's already a cert to check if it moved because like you didn't trust that the in place would work probably. So like it'll catch it if it happens. So it's not going to just silently happen at least.
Yeah, that's good. I think that would be the main thing I'd be concerned about is, the process heaps, because in that case, it's okay if we have to reallocate them. But if we do that, it's like a whole process because we have to do a GC cycle to make that work. And that relies on us suspending a process, having access to GC roots, all that jazz. But pretty much any time where we're going to be manipulating the memory of the process heap, we would have already been suspended and have access to the roots. I don't think there's ever a time where we're modifying the process heap size where we're not doing garbage collection. So it's probably not a big deal. As long as we're making sure that we're taking care of fixing everything up at that point. Which
underlying allocator are we using on Lumen by default? Or is it our own?
For the process heaps, it's the like slab out, or it's like that super carrier like hierarchy, right? I mean, we're using the actual alloc trade, not the global alloc trade. I mean, we do support the global alloc trade for our custom allocators, but the alloc trade is the one that we were primarily using.
Do we have any other allocator set as a global allocator in Lumen executables by default?
I mean, WASM uses realloc, but that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're using the system allocator as our default global allocator. I don't think we have any plans to change that unless we were potentially running into issues with like heap fragmentation, where we really want all memory that's allocated to go through, the same system of allocators, just like Erlang does. But I don't, my assumption at least was that as long as we're managing, all the runtime memory the way we need to, it doesn't really matter how Rust does its allocations, because they're probably going to be relatively small proportion of the overall memory that's being allocated. So fragmentation probably wouldn't be a huge issue, but it really is hard to tell without, quite a bit of testing.
And then
Yeah, I was just curious.
the other thing not related to allocators is they tightened up the uses of specialization. So now they issue a warning that specialization is an incomplete feature, and that maybe you want min specialization instead, or you have to allow incomplete features because they still don't trust the soundness of specialization. So do we want to switch to min specialization, or just say we're okay with the incomplete feature and we might be unsound?
What's the difference?
I don't know. I'd have to look. It is literally, I'm reading like the warning I get right now.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to check it out. I mean, the main reason I think we're using specialization is just in a couple places where, it's in a hot code path. But if min specialization covers the use case for us there, then I don't see any reason why we can't make that adjustment. I don't think we're doing anything particularly clever or crazy with it.
I'll just try min specialization and see if it still works. So like it shouldn't compile, right? Because it'll say that we implemented a trait twice if we don't have specialization, correct?
Yeah, it'll just error if it doesn't work.
Okay, yeah, I'll do it that way then. Yeah, the other thing I wasn't sure of if we should make the underlying allocators look more like global alloc, because global alloc is still weird in that it's the same. So there's still like a mismatch of like global alloc has alloc, but allocator now has allocate. So I wasn't sure if I did allocator because it had a bigger API as like the underlying API for our allocators, but I'm not sure if they made the most sense. But
yeah, I mean, my thought was that we can always implement global alloc on top of, the richer alloc API. But
yeah, the other thing with allocator is that it like it's nicer, so like it returns non-null slices, so like the length is there, so it's like a nicer API to work with. It's just we have to wrap stuff when we get just mute pointers from global, but it seems to work fine.
Was there anything else, Luke, on your players? Pretty much just making that.
That's it. It's just incredibly slow with like zero free time before I go to sleep most nights. So
on my end, I finished up the binary comprehension thing, and I have that pushed up. Now I'm not satisfied with the tests on that still. So I've had to return to the interpreter, like the one I have in EIR a little bit, and fleshing out the term model for that. So I'm just pulling out the term model, and I'm making a unified term implementation for like ordering and all of the common things for terms in a separate crate that I can pull into both the front end and the interpreter. So I'm basically just pulling out two half-baked term implementations into a full one. Yeah, that's what I'm been working on today.
Oh, I just tried it. We can't use min specialization. It doesn't let us do our specializations of format debug. So we'll have to keep with specialization for now and just do allow incomplete feature.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's something we can investigate when we have a little bit more time at some point. I don't, as far as I know, our usages, their specialization are sound enough. Like we're not reliant on the safety of those specializations as far as I can recall. I think they're pretty much all. The current
mark specialization for soundness is something to do with lifetimes.
Yeah,
so
I think as long as we avoid implementations for lifetimes, we might be okay in most cases at least.
Oh, for different lifetimes, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we're specializing over lifetimes at all right now. we might have trait implementations that are parameterized by lifetime, but we're not specializing 2 different ways for 2 different lifetimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I guess that pretty much covers everything. And Brian, I don't know if you had any thoughts or anything this week.
No, I don't have anything this week.
Cool. Do we have a sense of like what the conference situation is going to be this year?
I emailed Jim before Christmas. I should follow up with him. We had previously talked about doing that kind of one-off, just Lumen one.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim wanted to hit certain milestones. If we were to use his, I don't remember the name of it now, but that app that he built for ElixirConf, he wanted to hit certain milestones before he opened it up to anybody else. I'll follow up to him to see where the state of that is at.
Okay.
But we're in control of course, when that would happen. And so,
Yeah.
Paul, if you feel like WASM compilation is in sight, we can wait until that starts to come to fruition. I think if we were to do something like that, we should have a reason for doing so, where it's like we're basically handing people over something that they can start using.
I mean, it shouldn't just be WASM. Like right now, we can't do OTP.
Oh no, I understand. But the message originally was around WASM, so I think that's where people's expectations are. And so if we were to deliver something different where WASM was still on the horizon, because people's expectations were a certain way, they may not consume it how we want them to, right? So they're saying, "Oh, I'm getting this instead of that." So while if it was WASM and other things, I think that'd be great. But I think at the bare minimum, before we go through the effort of putting together like a mini, either remote meetup or whatever form it's going to take, I think that WASM compilation probably has to be part of that if we're going to attach some significance to people would be looking at that as a launch, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree that if we're going to do sort of like our own dedicated little thing, that we probably want to make that contingent on progress around WebAssembly. But I'm also just interested in general in what the conference landscape is going to be like this year, in case we want to do any talks, or at least, pitch some talks. I don't know if we'd actually end up doing any of them, but.
Brian, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I'm actually in the beginning phases of seeing about an in-person version of the Big Elixir in November right now.
An in-person one?
Yeah, in November.
Okay.
I'm crossing our fingers. It's
seems potentially viable. It definitely depends on how the vaccine distribution goes.
Yeah, I think
November will be early for children, like the expected trials. Now, mind you, the trials go faster when everyone gets sick, but the current expected end of trials for like all age groups and pregnant women isn't until the fall, so like September. So like potentially everyone will be vaccinated by then, but it's like it would be super early for everyone. So it might be that people won't go because their kids aren't actually vaccinated.
Yeah, and part of the thing is right now I'm looking for speakers, and then I'm going to follow up with them basically like I don't know every month or so. I'm just looking like to gauge comfort level, because if things don't go well, then we're just going to nix it.
Yeah,
that's
Brian. My take on it is, I think if the Biden administration can hit their goal of 100 million vaccinations in the first 100 days, you're in a lot better position to probably head in that direction. If they come short of it, then I wouldn't be confident that we're going to have mass vaccination by the fall, even 100 days out from now. I mean, that puts us what into mid-March,
Mm-hmm.
and they're currently, I think the country's currently at what, less than 20 million vaccinations. So we'll see.
I've just been following Louisiana. I know we're at 6.4%.
Yeah, Massachusetts
Yeah,
is one of the worst, actually.
Like last week, the press secretary said that they went back and recalculated. And it was like 17, and they were getting 500,000 a day. But I think those were shots, not like full doses. Because like if they were doing them today, you have to wait 3 to 4 weeks and then do it again, and then like. So if that's shots per day and not like full immunizations per day, it's actually like half the number of people. So it's only 250,000 per day. But now I can't remember if the 17 was shots or full immunizations, darn it.
Brian, I would, if I were you, I would if you're going to do the same venue that you did before, make sure you have some sort of like cancellation policy that you can lean on.
Oh
in the
yeah,
event that you need to.
Yeah, we definitely do that like every year because
you know, like Jim got
have a better policy than Jim.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
He gets like screwed entirely on that.
I don't think entirely. I think it's a lot of, from what I heard, they wanted to push it to this year, and with a guarantee that it had to be used, and Jim was fighting it on that. It was like, okay, we understand what's happening. We're going to push it to next year, but you have to use it. Or something even more ridiculous, like it was 6 months after the fact. Something that just wasn't going to happen anyway. They were just looking to make their money one way or the other. But it was
that's too bad.
I wouldn't be surprised if he lost some money on it.
Yeah, I was wondering how that was going to play out.
Well, the most annoying part for him was then all the people that were believing he was trying to, like, because he had to make the decision on how he could close the financial gap, and so he did that paid tier for the access to the videos for the first 3 months. And there were people out there just trashing him, like saying, "Oh, well, this is ridiculous, blah blah blah." And this drives me nuts. And Brian, I'm sure you hear this as an organizer, and I heard it as an organizer. It drives me fucking crazy how cheap software engineers are when it comes to conferences. Like, it is like you go to any other industry conference, and the tickets cost hundreds to thousands of dollars. And if a software conference ticket exceeds like $120, people throw a fucking fit over it. and then they get all pissed off if the amenities aren't fantastic. What's that?
You can increase the conference budget.
I mean, yeah, but then they get upset if the amenities aren't amazing, right? And
yeah,
so
I don't get the amenities.
It's a no-win.
Like, I'm always annoyed that there isn't the drink I want to drink anyway. So I'm like, I didn't need this. But from Jim, I understand that, like, that's the hotel forcing him to buy their food.
That happens all the time. Yeah. That's where they make their money. And so all the conferences I ran, we had to use the venue's catering. And it's like a wedding, right? And they make all their money off the food and the drinks. And it's insane. I remember one year I ran a Ruby conference, and they charged us, it was for coffee. And there was a Dunkin' Donuts right outside. They forced us to buy coffee, and it was like a 3 to 4 times markup over what Dunkin' Donuts was offering. Yeah, it was ridiculous. They screw you big time.
Jim also said that it was like the rental for the AV equipment was like tens of thousands or maybe 100,000 for just to like have the AV and networking equipment in one of the venues. Like, it's bad. Like,
to increase the internet as well. Like, they just had to flip a switch for this stuff, and that equipment they buy and they just have. It's a racket everywhere. Anyway, so I sympathize with Jim, and I was pretty annoyed that those assholes were giving him a hard time over it.
Yeah, the hotels make their money on the conference rooms as their profit centers. It's not the actual hotel rooms. Like, they don't lose money, but it's not where they get their margins.
Yeah. I mean, that's why the last ElixirConf, they're trying to host a lot of things there because you can't go anywhere, right? You have to stay on the, like, where are you
Yeah.
going to go? You're screwed. It's like an hour and a half into Denver, and you're stuck there, and you have to spend money at their hotel.
Would have been, perfectly nice place if the fucking power was working.
Or if it didn't catch on
Oh,
fire.
that.
Yeah.
That too. that
was
Well, the food,
that was a fun.
I don't know. I wasn't a big fan of the food. I thought the food, the restaurants weren't that great. But I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It was their first year being open, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a while for these businesses
Rough
to kind of
start.
get their footing. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I mean,
all I have to say to answer your question, Paul, I haven't done a lot on that in the past month, but where things had left off was I was really waiting to hear back from Jim on certain things. Other than Brian mentioning that he was looking to do his conference in November right now, I haven't heard anything on any other Elixir conferences.
Yeah, me either. That's why I was kind of curious. I'm not expecting there to be a whole lot of, activity around that, but
I mean,
was
there are
just
the
curious if there's any news.
there's the Erlang solution ones like the Beam conferences.
Yeah, I did see some emails from them about doing something. I guess I don't even know when that was supposed to be,
Yeah.
or if there
I will
was even a
say,
date.
we
They've been doing them
we are-
remote. I ran a panel. I ran a panel for one of them like 2 weeks after ElixirConf, but I haven't. Yeah, I don't know if they've done any more since.
What were you saying, Brian?
yeah, we aren't like announcing anything until probably May.
I got news for you, Brian. This is being recorded. So,
Yeah. So it's in the works, but we are being very like we're not 100% sure this is going to happen. And even after we announce it, it's going to be like we're like month to month trying to figure things out. And if we have to
Yeah.
shut it down, we'll shut it down.
I mean, I my hat's off to you for trying. I hope it works out.
Yeah,
Definitely
thanks.
worth it. Just as long as you're not up against a wall with like the venue and stuff. I mean, why not, right? Because if it does work out, then the venue benefits. The community gets to have a conference at some point. And if it
Right.
doesn't work out, then no harm, no foul. But if you're pinched between a rock and a hard place, if it doesn't work out, that definitely sucks. So
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's a buyer's market right now because
probably,
these
yeah.
places are trying to get as many, something. So we'll see.
Cool. Well, I guess that about covers everything for this week. If anything comes up in the meantime, I guess ping us all on Slack. We'll talk in a week.
All right.
All right.
Take care.
Yeah.